4 days ago, I sat at my parents' dining room table and watched them announce that everything I'd sacrificed for would belong to someone else. The room was full of family, all smiling, all nodding, all waiting for me to accept it like I'd accepted everything else my entire life. My mother looked at me with that expression I knew so well, the one that said I'd understand, that I'd be fine, that I didn't need what everyone else did. And for 48 years I would have nodded. I would have smiled, but not this time, because I knew something they didn't. And when I finally spoke, the room shattered. My name is Claire Thompson. I'm 48 years old, and 4 days ago, I watched my parents sit across from me at their kitchen table and tell me that the house I'd been paying for would belong to my brother. Not half to him, half to me. Just him, all of it. As if the last 6 years of mortgage payments I'd made had simply evaporated into thin air. As if my name on those bank transfers meant nothing. My mother stirred her tea slowly, deliberately, like she was buying time before dropping a bomb she knew would shatter everything. My father wouldn't even look at me. He just stared at his hands. Those weathered hands that built cabinets for 40 years but couldn't build up the courage to tell me the truth earlier. I should tell you how we got here, because this story doesn't start 4 days ago. It starts decades before that, in a childhood where I learned that being good meant being invisible, and being helpful meant being used. I grew up in Cedar Ridge, Ohio, where everyone knows your business before you do, and family loyalty isn't just valued, it's weaponized. My father, Harold Thompson, worked himself to the bone as a carpenter. My mother, Janice, ran the household with an iron fist wrapped in casserole recipes and church committee meetings. Then there was Mark, my older brother by 3 years, the golden child who could do no wrong even when he was doing everything wrong. And then there was me, Claire, the dependable one, the one who didn't complain, the one who helped without being asked and smiled while doing it. I remember being 8 years old, sitting on the stairs in my nightgown, listening to my mother talk to Mrs. Patterson from next door. They were having coffee in the living room, and I should have been asleep, but something in my mother's tone made me stay. "Claire's a good girl," she said, laughing that light laugh she reserved for company. "She doesn't need much." "Really? She's so easy?" "Not like Mark. He needs more attention. You know how boys are." I sat there in the darkness, knees pulled to my chest, and something cold settled in my stomach. Even at 8, I understood what she meant. I was easy. I was manageable. I was the child who required less, so I would receive less. That night, I made myself a promise that I'd be so good, so helpful, so perfect, that they'd have no choice but to see me. To value me? To love me the way they loved Mark? I became the daughter who got straight A's without being asked. I cleared the table every night. I helped my father in his workshop on weekends, handing him tools, learning the names of wood types and joinery techniques. I thought if I made myself useful enough, I'd make myself essential. When I was 15, my parents bought the house on Maple Drive. It was a beautiful white 2-story with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, the kind of house that screamed American dream. We were living in a cramped rental at the time, and this house felt like a palace. The day they closed on it, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen while my father and Mark unloaded boxes from the truck. She put her hand on my shoulder, squeezed it gently, and said something that should have warned me about everything to come. "This house is your brother's inheritance, Claire. You'll understand when you're older. He'll need it more than you will. You're smart. You'll make your own way." I nodded because that's what I did. I nodded and smiled and swallowed down the questions that were bubbling up in my throat. Why does Mark get the house? Why not both of us? What makes him more deserving? But I didn't ask. Good girls don't ask questions like that. Good girls understand. Good girls accept. Except I didn't understand. Not really. I just learned to stop expecting anything that wasn't explicitly offered. Mark dropped out of college twice. I graduated summa cum laude. Mark bounced between jobs like he was playing hopscotch. I built a career in medical billing, steady and reliable. Mark got arrested for a DUI at 23, and my parents paid for the lawyer, the fines, the insurance hike. I paid my own way through everything. And through it all, that house on Maple Drive stood there like a monument to everything I'd never have. Everything I'd never be given. No matter how good I was, I moved out at 25, got my own apartment, visited every Sunday for dinner. I watched Mark move back in with my parents 4 different times. I watched him borrow money he never paid back. I watched my mother make excuses and my father enable it with his silence. And I stayed quiet because that's what I'd been trained to do. Then 6 years ago, everything changed. My father had a stroke. Not a massive one, but enough to put him out of work permanently. The medical bills started piling up. My mother called me crying, something she never did, and told me they were going to lose the house. They couldn't make the mortgage payments anymore. Mark was living there rent-free as always, working part-time at a sporting goods store and contributing exactly nothing. I did what I always do. I started making their mortgage payments, $1,400 a month, every single month, for 6 years. That's over $100,000. Money I could have used for my own down payment, my own future, my own life. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they needed me. I told myself that surely this would mean something. 4 days ago, I found out exactly what it meant. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. 4 days ago was a Sunday. That's important, because Sundays were sacred in the Thompson household. Sunday dinner at 5 o'clock sharp, pot roast or chicken, always with those dinner rolls my mother made from scratch. I'd been coming to these dinners for 23 years, ever since I moved out. Through my short marriage to David, through the divorce, through every holiday and birthday and ordinary weekend in between, I showed up because that's what you do. That's what family means. Or so I thought. But let me back up, because you need to understand how I became the person who pays for a house she never owned. After college, I got my accounting degree and started working for a medical supply company. The work was steady, boring, exactly what I needed. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't play favorites. Numbers are fair in a way people never are. I met David when I was 20. He was a sales rep, charming in that easy way that should have been a red flag but felt like sunshine at the time. We got married too fast, divorced even faster. No kids, thank God. Just a quiet unraveling of two people who realized they'd mistaken loneliness for love. I was 29 and single again, living in a one-bedroom apartment, visiting my parents every Sunday like clockwork. That same year, my father had his first heart scare. Not a full heart attack, but enough to land him in the hospital for 3 days and rack up bills that made my mother's hands shake. When she opened the envelopes, I came over on a Thursday evening, not a Sunday, which should have told me something was wrong. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of her like a terrible hand of cards. "Claire," she said, not looking up, "we need help. Just temporarily." The medical bills were crushing them. My father's insurance didn't cover as much as they thought. They'd already borrowed from their retirement account. The mortgage was going to be late for the second month in a row. "How much do you need?" I asked. She told me. I wrote the check that night. 1 mortgage payment, just to get them through. Except it wasn't just 1. It turned into 2, then 3, then a pattern that stretched across years. By the time I was 35, I'd been supplementing their income for 6 years, and I started noticing something that made my accountant brain itch with suspicion. The mortgage balance was going down faster than it should have been based on what I knew they were paying. I pulled up their loan documents one Sunday. While my mother was in the bathroom and my father was dozing in his recliner, the numbers didn't add up. Their income from Social Security and my father's small pension couldn't possibly cover these payments. Not with their other expenses. But every month, like clockwork, that principal balance dropped. I asked my mother about it casually, helping her dry dishes after dinner. "Mom, did you guys refinance the house?" I noticed the payments seemed different. She didn't even pause in her wiping of the casserole dish. "Oh, we worked something out with the bank," she said breezily. "Don't worry about adult things, Claire. You've got enough on your plate." I was 35 years old. I was an accountant. I literally spent my days worrying about financial details for a living. But I let it go because that's what I did. I let things go. I swallowed my questions. I trusted that my parents wouldn't lie to me about something this important. What a stupid, naive thing to believe. That night, I went home and started a file folder. I labeled it Maple Drive and started keeping copies of everything. Every check I wrote, every bank transfer I made, every email where my mother asked for help with this bill or that expense. I told myself I was just being thorough, organized, the way accountants are supposed to be. But deep down, in that place where 8-year-old Claire still sat on the stairs listening to her mother say she didn't need much, I knew I was building evidence. Evidence of what? I wasn't sure yet. Mark was still living at the house. On and off. Mostly on. He'd moved out twice in those years. Once with a girlfriend who left him after 3 months. Once for a job opportunity in Columbus that fell through after 6 weeks. Each time he came back, he settled into his old bedroom like he'd never left, contributing nothing to the household expenses. Eating my mother's cooking, leaving his laundry for her to do. He was 38 years old. I asked my mother once, carefully, why Mark didn't help with the bills. "He's going through a tough time," she said. "He's figuring things out. You know how hard it is for men these days, Claire. You have a good job. You're stable. Mark needs our support." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask when my tough times had mattered. When my struggles had earned me the right to move home rent-free and be coddled and excused. But I didn't. I just nodded and wrote another check. By the time I was 40, I'd paid over $70,000 toward that mortgage. I started tracking it obsessively in a spreadsheet. Date, amount, payment method, which bill it covered. The file folder became a binder. The binder became a box. I had everything documented, every single dollar I'd contributed to keeping that house standing. My friends thought I was crazy. My coworker Lisa asked me once over lunch why I kept doing it. "Claire," she said, leaning across the table at the diner where we ate every Tuesday. They're using you. You know that, right? I did know that. But what was I supposed to do? Let them lose the house. Let my father, who'd worked his whole life, lose the one thing he'd built for his family. Let my mother, who'd never worked outside the home, end up homeless in her 70s. I couldn't do that. So I kept paying, and I kept documenting, and I told myself that surely it meant something. That surely they saw what I was doing. That surely when the time came when decisions were made about the future, about inheritance, about who got what, my contributions would matter. I wasn't doing it for the house, I told myself. I was doing it because it was right, because family helps family, because that's what good daughters do. But late at night, alone in my apartment with my spreadsheets open on my laptop, I'd calculate the equity I'd built in a house that wasn't mine. I'd think about the down payment I could have made on my own place. I'd think about the retirement account I could have funded. I'd think about all the ways I'd invested in everyone else's future while neglecting my own. And then I'd close the laptop and go to bed and show up for Sunday dinner like nothing was wrong. Until 4 days ago, when my mother finally said the quiet part out loud, and I realized I'd been tracking the evidence of my own betrayal all along. Mark got married when I was 38. Her name was Stephanie, and she came with 2 kids from 2 different fathers, a mountain of credit card debt, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. My mother was thrilled. Finally, she said, dabbing at her eyes at the small courthouse wedding, Mark's settling down. He's going to be a father figure to those children. He needs stability now. Claire. Family stability. I knew what was coming before she even said it. They moved into the house on Maple Drive, all 4 of them. Into my parents' house. Mark's house, really, though nobody had officially said it yet. The house I'd been paying for. My mother converted the basement into a bedroom for Kyle and Emma. Mark and Stephanie took Mark's old room. My parents squeezed their lives smaller and smaller to accommodate this new family unit that contributed nothing but noise and expense. I watched it happen from my usual spot at the Sunday dinner table. My usual role as the dependable daughter who showed up and smiled and pretended everything was fine. Mark lost his job at the sporting goods store 6 months after the wedding. Something about inventory discrepancies, though the details were always vague when my parents explained it. Then it was a job at a warehouse gone after 4 months. Then a position at an auto parts store lasted maybe 8 weeks. Each time my father would call me on a Tuesday evening or a Thursday afternoon. Never on Sunday when I'd be there in person. Always when I was alone and easier to manipulate. Claire, honey, he'd say, his voice tired and small. Mark's hit a rough patch. Just until he gets back on his feet. Could you maybe help with the utilities this month? Or the car payment? Or the grocery bill? And I did. Every single time, I did, because what was the alternative? Watch my niece and nephew go hungry? Watch the electricity get shut off? I told myself I was helping the kids, not Mark. That made it easier to write the checks. Stephanie didn't work. She had various reasons, various excuses. Her back hurt. The kids needed her home. She was looking, but nothing felt right. My mother defended her constantly. It's hard for women with children, Claire, she'd say. You wouldn't understand. You don't have kids. The judgment in that statement sat between us like a third person at the table. My childlessness, my divorce, my solitary life, all of it proved that I had room to give more, to sacrifice more, because I had less to lose. Mark would show up to Sunday dinners in new sneakers while I wore the same 3 pairs of work shoes for years. Stephanie got her nails done while I cut my own hair in my bathroom. The kids had the latest gaming system while I packed leftovers to stretch my grocery budget. And every month like clockwork, I paid the mortgage. $1,400, then $1,500 when the property taxes went up, then $1,600. For 7 years I paid. My friends stopped asking me to go on trips. Lisa gave up inviting me to concerts. I had no savings for emergencies, no cushion for myself, because every extra dollar went to Maple Drive. When I turned 41, I offered to help my parents with their taxes. I'd been doing it for years anyway, and it was easier than them paying someone. My mother brought me a shoebox full of receipts and forms and bank statements. The chaotic record-keeping of people who'd never had enough money to need a system. I sat at their dining room table with my laptop, organizing everything, entering numbers into the software. That's when I saw it. The mortgage payment? The automatic draft, it was coming from my account. My checking account, the one I'd set up years ago to make it easier to send them money, but it was labeled as a family transfer, and the authorization had my digital signature on it, except I'd never authorized an automatic payment. I'd been sending money manually each month, writing checks or doing bank transfers, always keeping control of when and how much. My hands went cold. I stared at the screen, at 7 years of automatic withdrawals at the date the authorization had been set up. 3 years ago, I would have remembered setting that up. I was meticulous about my finances. This wasn't something I'd forget, Mom, I called out. keeping my voice level. "Can you come here for a second?" She came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, that pleasant Sunday dinner smile on her face. "What's up, honey?" I turned the laptop toward her. "This mortgage payment, it's set up as an automatic draft from my account. I didn't authorize this." Her smile didn't falter, but something flickered in her eyes, something quick and guilty that she covered almost instantly. "Well," she said, her voice light and dismissive, "you said you wanted to help. We just made it easier for everyone. You're so busy. We didn't want you to have to remember every month." I felt something crack open inside my chest. "Made it easier? You set up automatic withdrawals from my account without asking me." She waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "Oh, Claire, don't be so sensitive. You've been paying it anyway. This just streamlines things. Your father needed help setting it up on the computer, and you'd given us your account information before, so we just—" She trailed off, finally sensing that her casual explanation wasn't landing the way she'd hoped. I closed the laptop slowly. "How long has this been happening?" 3 years, she said. "Maybe 4. I don't remember exactly." She was lying. I could see it in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, and the way she kept folding and unfolding that dish towel. "You forged my authorization? That's bank fraud, Mom." Now she looked at me, and her expression shifted into something I'd seen 1,000 times before. Disappointment hurt. The look that said I was being difficult, ungrateful, not the good daughter she'd raised. "Claire," she said, her voice taking on that martyred tone, "after everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed, you're going to accuse us of fraud? We're family. Family helps each other. We thought you understood that." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. After everything they'd done for me, what had they done for me except teach me that my value was measured in how much I could give while asking for nothing in return? That night, I went home and pulled up 7 years of bank statements, 7 years of automatic withdrawals, $1,600 a month. For 84 months? I did the math 3 times because I couldn't believe it. $134,400. I'd paid $134,000 toward a house I didn't own, half of it without even knowing the payments were being taken from my account. I sat on my apartment floor with printouts spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. And you know what the worst part was? Not one thank you. Not in 7 years. Not a card, not a phone call, not a single acknowledgement that I'd sacrificed my entire financial future to keep their house standing. Just expectations. Just assumptions. Just the quiet certainty that good daughters like Claire don't need much, and what they do need doesn't matter anyway. I thought about Mark asleep in his childhood bedroom with his wife and her kids, living rent-free in a house I'd paid for. I thought about my parents, grateful for Mark's presence for the grandchildren, for the full house that made them feel less alone. And I thought about myself, 41 years old, alone in a rented apartment with nothing to show for a lifetime of being good, except a spreadsheet full of evidence that being good had gotten me absolutely nowhere. 4 days ago, my mother called on a Wednesday. "Claire, honey," she said, her voice bright with forced cheer, "can you come to dinner on Sunday? We're having a little gathering. Family thing." Something cold settled in my stomach. My mother didn't do gatherings. She did Sunday dinners, routine and predictable. Gatherings meant something else, something planned. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "Oh, you know," she said, too casually. "Just want everyone together. It's been too long. Please come. It's important." I almost said no. Some instinct, some part of me that had been documenting evidence for years, knew that whatever this gathering was, it wasn't going to be good for me. But I said yes anyway because that's what I always did. Because good daughters show up even when they know they're walking into an ambush. Sunday arrived. I pulled up to the house on Maple Drive at 4:30, half an hour early, like always, ready to help my mother with the final dinner preparations. But there were already cars in the driveway. My Uncle Ray's truck, my Aunt Linda's sedan, even Mrs. Polk's old Buick from next door. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an audience. I walked in through the front door, and the living room was full. Mark and Stephanie on the couch, dressed nicer than I'd seen them in years. Kyle and Emma playing on the floor with their tablets. Aunt Linda and Uncle Ray at the dining table. Mrs. Polk in the armchair by the window. Cousins I hadn't seen in months, scattered around the room. Everyone turned to look at me when I entered, and the conversations died into awkward silence. "Claire," my mother said, coming out of the kitchen with a tray of cheese and crackers. "You're here? Come in. Sit down. We're just about to start what?" I wanted to ask, but my throat was tight. I sat in the only empty chair, a folding one they'd brought in from the garage, positioned slightly outside the circle of family. Even my seating was symbolic. My father stood up, clearing his throat the way he did before he said something he'd rehearsed. He looked uncomfortable, his tie too tight, his face slightly red. "Everyone," he said, "thank you for coming. Janice and I wanted to gather the family because we have an important announcement to make." My mother stood beside him, her hand on his arm, both of them looking at Mark. We've been thinking a lot about the future, my father continued. About legacy and what we want to leave behind. This house has been in our family for over 30 years now. It's where we raised our children. It's where Mark is raising his family now. My heart started pounding. I knew what was coming. I'd known for years, really, but hearing it out loud was different. Feeling the room hold its breath was different. We've decided, my father said, his voice getting stronger like he was gaining confidence, that when we're gone, this house will go to Mark. He needs the stability. He's got the kids to think about. It's the right thing to do. Mark grinned. Actually grinned like he'd won something. Stephanie squeezed his hand, her face lit up with triumph. My Aunt Linda nodded approvingly. Uncle Ray clapped Mark on the shoulder. Mrs. Polk smiled, that knowing smile of elderly neighbors, who think they understand family dynamics they know nothing about. My mother turned to me then, and her expression was so carefully constructed, so perfectly calibrated to look both apologetic and firm. Of course, Claire, you understand, she said. You've always been so independent. So capable. You don't need this house the way Mark does. You'll make your own way. You always have. The room waited. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to do what I always did. Nod, smile, agree, be the good daughter, who doesn't need much and doesn't cause trouble. My father was already starting to relax, thinking the hard part was over. Mark was already planning. I could see it in his eyes, probably thinking about which rooms he'd renovate first, how he'd finally have something that was truly his. I smiled. I felt my face arrange itself into that pleasant, agreeable expression I'd perfected over 48 years. And then I said, before we celebrate, can I ask who you think pays the mortgage? The room went silent. Not the polite silence of before, but something sharp and sudden, like the air had been sucked out. What? My mother said, her smile freezing on her face. The mortgage, I repeated, my voice steady and calm. Who do you think pays it? My father blinked. Well, we do, he said. We've been paying it for years. Have you? I said. It wasn't a question. I pulled my phone out of my purse, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward him. Because according to my bank records, I've been paying it. $1,600 a month. For the last 7 years, that's $134,400. Would you like to see the transaction history? The silence shattered into chaos. My mother's face went white. Mark sat forward, his grin vanishing. What are you talking about? He said. You've been helping out. Sure, but helping out, I interrupted. And my voice was sharper now, all the years of swallowed anger finally finding their way to the surface. Is that what you call it? I haven't been helping out, Mark. I've been paying the mortgage. The entire mortgage, every single month for 7 years. While you've been living here rent-free with your family, I've been keeping this house from foreclosure. My father shook his head. Claire, that's not. I have the bank statements, I said, cutting him off. I have 7 years of automatic withdrawals from my account. Withdrawals that were set up without my permission, by the way, which is fraud. I have emails from Mom asking for money. I have records of every utility bill I've covered, every car payment I've made, every grocery run I've funded. I've been documenting everything. The room was frozen. Aunt Linda looked confused. Uncle Ray looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Polk was staring at her hands. Stephanie's mouth was hanging open. My mother found her voice first. Claire, she said, and now her tone was sharp, defensive. You offered to help. We never forced you. You're right, I said. I did offer. Because you told me it was temporary? You told me it was just until Dad recovered from his heart scare? That was 13 years ago, Mom. 13 years of temporary help. Mark stood up, his face red. So what? He said. You want the house? Is that it? You've been keeping some kind of twisted scorecard so you could steal my inheritance. I laughed. It came out bitter and cold. Your inheritance? Mark, you can't inherit something that would have been foreclosed on without me. This house only still exists because I've been paying for it. You've been living in a house I own, even if my name's not on the deed. My mother's eyes filled with tears, the weapon she'd always used when reason failed. How can you be so cruel, she said. After everything we've done for you, raising you, giving you a home, loving you, what have you done for me, I said, and my voice broke on the last word. I looked around the room at all these people who were supposed to be my family. What have any of you done for me except take? When have I ever been more than the reliable one, the helpful one? The one who doesn't need much. When have I mattered to any of you as more than a checkbook? Nobody answered. The room stayed silent, and in that silence I finally understood that they had no answer, because I hadn't mattered. Not really. Not in the way that counted. I stood up from that folding chair, the one they'd positioned just outside the family circle, and I pulled out my phone with hands that were steadier than I expected. For 7 years, I said, my voice calm and clear in a way that surprised even me. I've paid $2,146 every month. Not $1,600, like I said before. I was rounding down. $2,146 that covered the mortgage, the property insurance, and the property taxes. Directly to this house, every single month, without fail. Mark laughed, but it was nervous, edgy. Come on, Claire. That's not funny. Don't be dramatic. I wasn't being dramatic. I turned my phone screen toward the table, toward my father who'd gone very still, toward my mother whose smile had completely disappeared. Dates? I said. Amounts, transaction numbers, transfer confirmations. All of it. 7 years of proof that I've been the only thing standing between this family and homelessness. Aunt Linda gasped, her hand going to her mouth. Uncle Ray muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. Mrs. Polk suddenly looked very interested in the door, like she was calculating how quickly she could leave. Stephanie stared at the phone screen, her face shifting from confusion to something harder. That can't be right, Mark said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Dad, tell her she's lying. My father opened his mouth, closed it, looked at my mother. My mother looked at me with something that might have been fear. Claire, she said softly, sit down. Let's talk about this privately. No, I said. We're going to talk about it right here, right now, in front of everyone you invited to witness my humiliation. Because there's one more thing none of you know. I paused, let the silence build, felt the power of information shift in my direction for the first time in my entire life. When Dad had his stroke 6 years ago, you needed to refinance to afford the medical bills. Remember that? My father nodded slowly, his face going pale. I co-signed that refinance, I continued, because the bank wouldn't approve it based on your income alone. You needed my income, my credit score, my signature, to keep this house. Which means the mortgage isn't just in your names anymore. It's in mine too. The room exploded. What? Mark shouted, jumping to his feet. That's bullshit. You never said. You never asked. I shot back. None of you asked. You just assumed I was writing checks out of the goodness of my heart. While you planned to give away a house that I'm legally obligated to pay for? My mother was shaking her head, tears starting to stream down her face. Claire, please. You're humiliating us. In front of everyone. Good, I said. And I meant it. I'm tired of being humiliated privately. I'm tired of being the family secret, the one who pays for everything while everyone else takes credit. You wanted everyone here to witness Mark getting the house? Fine. Now they can witness the truth of who actually owns it. Stephanie stood up, grabbing her purse. This is insane, she hissed. Mark, we're leaving. She stormed toward the door, but Mark didn't follow right away. He stood there staring at me like he'd never seen me before. You can't do this, he said, and for the first time in our lives he sounded uncertain. You can't just take the house. I'm not taking anything, I said quietly. I'm just refusing to give away what's already mine. There's a difference. You don't inherit a house you've never paid for. You don't get to claim something as yours when someone else has been bleeding themselves dry to maintain it. This house has been mine for 7 years. Mark, you've just been living in it. My father finally found his voice. Claire, he said, and he sounded old, tired. We can work this out. We can figure something fair. Fair, I repeated, and I laughed without humor. Now, you want to talk about fair? Where was fair when I was paying your mortgage while working 60-hour weeks? Where was fair when Mark moved his family in rent-free? Where was fair every single Sunday when I sat at this table and pretended everything was fine while you planned to erase me from this family's future? Uncle Ray cleared his throat. Claire's got a point, Harold, he said, and my father shot him a look that could have frozen water. Linda Ray, maybe you should go, my mother said, her voice brittle. This is family business. I've been paying for this family business, I said. For over a decade, they deserve to know what they've been watching. What you've all been complicit in? Aunt Linda stood up, gathering her purse, her face conflicted. She touched my shoulder as she passed. Good for you, honey, she whispered. Someone needed to say it. They left. So did Mrs. Polk, practically fleeing. The cousins followed, embarrassed and uncomfortable. Soon it was just my parents, Mark, and me standing in the living room that I'd furnished with my money. Under the roof I'd kept over their heads. My mother was crying openly now. You're tearing this family apart, she sobbed. How can you do this to us? How can you? I asked, and my voice finally broke. How can you stand there and make me the villain when all I've ever done is sacrifice everything for this family? I gave up my savings, my retirement, my future. I gave up trips and relationships and experiences because I was too busy making sure you didn't lose this house. And you were planning to give it away like I never existed? Mark sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. I didn't know, he said. I swear, Claire, I didn't know you were paying that much. You never asked, I said. None of you ever asked. You just took and assumed I'd keep giving forever because that's what Claire does. Claire doesn't need much. Claire is strong. Claire will handle it. Well, I'm done handling it. My father looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. What do you want? He asked. What do I want? I felt the weight of that question, the absurdity of it. I want what I've already paid for. I want acknowledgement. I want someone in this family to admit that I've been used. That's what I want. But what I need is for you to understand that things are different now. I left that night with my documentation, my bank records, my proof of everything. I didn't slam doors or make dramatic exits. I just walked out quietly the way I'd done everything else in my life. Except this time I wasn't coming back the same way. 2 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office downtown. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she'd come highly recommended by a coworker. I spread out 7 years of bank statements, emails, the refinance documents I'd found buried in my files. She looked through everything with the careful attention of someone who'd seen family betrayals before. "This is clear," she said after an hour. "You're not just a co-signer. Based on the payment history and the refinance terms, you have a legitimate claim to a substantial portion of this property, possibly majority ownership, depending on how we calculate the equity you've built." "What are my options?" I asked. She laid them out. "I could force a sale. I could demand to be bought out. I could file for partition. Or I could wait and see if my parents were willing to negotiate reasonably now that they understood the legal reality." "How long do I have to decide?" "As long as you want," she said. "But Claire, the longer you wait, the more they'll try to manipulate you back into your old role. People don't like it when the person they've been using suddenly stops being useful. Strike while you have the leverage." Yesterday morning, my mother called. I saw her name on the screen and almost didn't answer. But I did, because some habits die hard. "Claire," she said, and her voice was different, smaller, scared. "Please, you're tearing us apart. We haven't slept. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Mark won't speak to us. This is destroying our family." I sat on my couch in my apartment. The same apartment I'd been renting for 15 years because I could never save enough for a down payment on my own place. "No, Mom," I said quietly. I just stopped holding it together alone. There was silence on the other end. Then, "Claire, please, we can work this out. We can figure something out." "Can we?" I asked. "Because 2 days ago you were ready to give the house to Mark without even telling me? You were ready to erase 13 years of my contributions like they never happened. Why should I believe anything's different now except that you got caught?" "Because we're family," she whispered. "Family doesn't do this to each other." I laughed and it came out broken. "You're right," I said. "Family doesn't do this to each other. So where have you been for the last 13 years? Where was family when I was drowning in your debts? Where was family when you forged my signature for automatic withdrawals? Where was family when you planned that announcement dinner designed to publicly diminish everything I've sacrificed?" She was crying. I could hear it. That particular sound of my mother crying that used to make me immediately want to fix things. To make everything better, but this time I felt nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Maybe I felt free. "I have to go," I said. "My lawyer says I shouldn't talk to you without her present anyway." "Claire, don't." I hung up. And I didn't call back when she tried 3 more times. This morning I drove past the house on Maple Drive. I don't know why. Maybe to see if it looked different now that I knew the truth. Maybe to say goodbye to the girl I'd been, the one who thought being good enough would make her matter. It looked the same. White siding that needed painting, blue shutters, one of them hanging crooked. The porch where I'd sat countless Sunday evenings watching fireflies and pretending I belonged. The tree in the front yard that my father planted when Mark was born, its branches thick and sprawling now. It looked like home. But it had never been my home. Not really. It had been a place where I was tolerated, utilized, expected to give without receiving. The deed arrived this morning. Not the full deed, not yet. But the legal documentation that proved what my lawyer had said. Based on my payments, my co-signing, my equity contributions, I own 68% of that house. My parents own the remaining 32%. Mark owns nothing. The paper was official stamped. Undeniable. I held it in my hands and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly. Not vindication. Something quieter and deeper. Ownership, not just of the house, but of my own story. For 48 years, I'd let other people write my narrative. The good daughter. The helpful one? The one who doesn't need much. I'd played the role so perfectly that I'd disappeared inside it. Become nothing more than a supporting character in everyone else's lives. But standing in my apartment this morning with that deed in my hands, I realized something. I'd spent 13 years paying for a house I thought I'd never own. But what I'd really been doing was buying my freedom. Every payment was proof that I didn't need them to validate me. Every documented transaction was evidence that I'd been the strong one all along. Not because I didn't need anything, but because I'd learned to need nothing from people who had nothing real to give. My phone has been ringing all day. My mother, my father, Mark, even Stephanie, which is almost funny. Aunt Linda sent a text that said, simply, "Proud of you." I haven't answered any of them. I'm not ready yet. Maybe I never will be, because here's what I've learned in the 4 days since that dinner. Since the announcement that broke the room and revealed the truth, no one expected. Family isn't supposed to be a transaction, but sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally only love what you can do for them. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop doing it. Stop sacrificing. Stop shrinking. Stop pretending that your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. I don't know what happens next. Maybe my parents will agree to sell the house and split the proceeds fairly. Maybe Mark will finally grow up and take responsibility for his own life. Maybe my mother will stop crying long enough to understand why I had to do this. Or maybe none of that will happen. Maybe they'll never forgive me for refusing to be used anymore. Maybe I'll be the villain in their story forever, the ungrateful daughter who destroyed the family. And you know what? I think I'm okay with that, because this morning, when I drove past that house on Maple Drive, I didn't feel the old familiar ache of wanting to belong there. I didn't feel the desperate need for their approval that had driven every decision I'd made for 48 years. I felt nothing but a quiet recognition of what was mine. The same white siding, the same porch light that I'd paid to keep burning, but now I hold the deed. Well, 68% of it anyway. And for the first time in my life, I'm not asking permission to stand in my own story. I'm not waiting to be seen. I'm not hoping that being good enough will finally make me matter. I already matter. I've always mattered. I just needed $134,000 in mortgage payments and a family dinner from hell to finally believe it. And if my parents want to know who really owns that house, they already do. They've known for 4 days now. And that knowledge, that shift in power, that understanding that the daughter they dismissed has been the foundation holding everything together this whole time, that's worth more than any inheritance they could have given me. Because I didn't wait for them to give me anything, I took what was already mine. My voice, my value, my truth. The house is just proof of what I've always been capable of when I stopped trying to be good and started demanding to be treated as equal. This isn't the ending I expected when I showed up to that Sunday dinner 4 days ago, but it's the ending I deserved all along. If you think Claire made the right choice, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in her situation. And smash that like button if you believe family should never take advantage of loyalty. Your support means everything to this channel.